Hello everyone! Welcome to Literature Revision with Mr. Johnston. Today, we are going to look at Chapter 2, Search for Mr. Hyde. This video will analyse our first extract from this chapter, Utterson's Nightmare. Before we begin, you may be interested in downloading my free resource for this extract. Click a link in the description box below to download this document for free. It comes complete with writing tables for taking notes, short writing tasks, and exemplar paragraphs. And now, on to Chapter 2. Let's summarise this extract first. At the beginning of Chapter 2, Utterson is very worried about Jekyll's relationship with Hyde. Enfield has just described how Hyde trampled the young girl. Utterson also knows that Jekyll provided a cheque to Hyde for the young girl's family. This raises serious questions. Why would such a respectable gentleman as Jekyll associate with this violent criminal? This makes Utterson very worried about Jekyll's will. This document says that all of Jekyll's property will pass into the hands of Edward Hyde if Jekyll dies or disappears. Utterson disapproved of this will when it was made, but now that he knows that Hyde is a dangerous criminal, he is even more concerned about it. That night, Utterson cannot get to sleep. He tosses and turns in his bed, unable to take his mind off Mr. Hyde. Utterson then has a nightmare about this villain. He firstly sees Hyde violently trample the young girl from Enfield's story. He then imagines Jekyll safe in his bed. Hyde suddenly breaks into Jekyll's bedroom. The villain then plucks open the curtains of a scientist's bed and stands over him, before awakening Jekyll and giving him orders. Utterson next sees Hyde running through the streets of London, in and out of people's houses. Utterson is unable to identify Hyde's appearance. Hyde keeps emerging either as a figure without a face, or one that melts before Utterson's eyes. We're now going to read the actual extract. If you would like to skip this reading, just jump to 4 minutes 25 seconds on the video. 6 o'clock struck on the bells of a church that was so conveniently near to Mr. Utterson's dwelling. And still, he was digging at the problem. Hitherto, it had touched him on the intellectual side alone. But now, his imagination also was engaged, or rather enslaved. And as he lay and tossed in the gross darkness of the night in the curtained room, Mr. Enfield's tale went before his mind in a scroll of lighted pictures. He would be aware of a great field of lamps of a nocturnal city, then of a figure of a man walking swiftly, then of a child running from a doctor's, and then these met. And that human juggernaut trod the child down, and passed on, regardless of her screams. Or else he would see a room in a rich house, where his friends lay asleep, dreaming and smiling at his dreams. And then the door of that room would be opened, the curtains of a bed plucked apart, the sleeper recalled, and lo! There would stand by his side a figure to whom power was given, and even at that dead hour he must arise and do its bidding. The figure in these two phases haunted the lawyer all night, and if at any time he dozed over, it was but to see it glide more stealthily through sleeping houses, or move more swiftly and still the more swiftly, even to dizziness through wider labyrinths of lamp-lighted city, and at every street corner crush a child and leave her screaming. And still, the figure had no face by which he might know it. Even in his dreams it had no face, or one that baffled him and melted before his eyes. And thus it was that there sprang up and grew apace in the lawyer's mind a singularly strong, almost an inordinate curiosity to behold the features of the real Mr. Hyde. Today, we're going to analyse this extract and answer the following question. How does Stevenson present Hyde as a threatening character? We will cover two main ideas. Here's number one. Stevenson presents Hyde as a dangerous threat to Jekyll. At one point in this extract, Utterson imagines Jekyll safe in the comfort of his rich house. Jekyll is in his bed, dreaming and smiling at his dreams. So, Utterson sees an idyllic image of Jekyll's life here. Jekyll is in his rich house, the sort of a house fitting for a wealthy gentleman. He is in bed, safe and secure and smiling at his dreams. Stevenson is creating an image of domestic bliss here. All seems to be well in Jekyll's life. Yet, Stevenson juxtaposes this peaceful image with the next disturbing description of Hyde's arrival in Jekyll's bedroom. Now, this description of Hyde breaking into Jekyll's bedroom is rather disturbing. Hyde is seriously violating Jekyll's private space here. Think about it. Your bedroom is the most private space of your house. It is a space most closed off from the outside world. It should be the place where you feel most safe and most secure. And yet, Jekyll cannot escape from Hyde even in this room. Stevenson seems to be suggesting that there is nowhere that Jekyll can go to escape Hyde's influence. Jekyll is not safe from Hyde even within the walls of his own bedroom. In another disturbing invasion of Jekyll's private space, Hyde next plucks the curtains of a scientist's bed apart. So you might be asking yourself, how can a bed have curtains? Well, in Victorian times, many wealthy people would have favoured what we call a four-poster bed. You can see one on the right here. When you would want to go to sleep, you would pull the curtains of your bed to make it dark. Now, Hyde approaches Jekyll's bed and plucks these curtains apart. Once again, this is an invasion of Jekyll's privacy. You can imagine how frightened you would feel if someone visited you in the middle of a night like this. More deeply, there is a sense that Hyde is exploiting Jekyll's vulnerability here by visiting him in bed. Stevenson is thus reinforcing our impression that Jekyll is powerless against Hyde. We next get a rather odd description. Hyde stands over Jekyll like one to whom power was given. Even at the dead hour of the night, the helpless Jekyll is forced to rise from his sleep and obey Hyde's bidding. This description is particularly menacing. Stevenson is revealing the power dynamic between Jekyll and Hyde. It seems that Jekyll is utterly powerless in this relationship. He must rise out of bed and follow Hyde's orders even if they are given in the middle of the night. But this description is made all the more disturbing because of its vagueness. Utterson's dream never actually reveals what Hyde orders Jekyll to do. The nature of this relationship thus remains a perplexing mystery to the anxious lawyer and the reader. Why does Stevenson use such ambiguity? Well, this ambiguity really heightens the sense of sinister mystery around Jekyll's relationship with Hyde. Stevenson is playing with the reader's imagination here. The reader is going to be asking themselves all sorts of questions about the strange relationship between Jekyll and Hyde. Why does Hyde visit Jekyll in the middle of the night? Why does Jekyll seem so powerless against Hyde? Why does this respectable gentleman associate with this criminal? Such questions really increase the tension of this chapter. So we're not quite sure what to make of Jekyll's relationship with Hyde, but one thing is clear. The relationship between Jekyll and Hyde seems to represent something unspeakably twisted and disturbing. Now, many readers will sense that there is an underlying sexual undertone to this encounter. We won't explore this idea in our video, but you can read my resource to learn more about this interpretation. We have now explored our first idea. Stevenson presents Hyde as a dangerous threat to Jekyll. Let's now test your memory on these key words. You have 10 seconds to fill in the words in bold. Off you go. Okay, let's see how well we have done. Stevenson presents Hyde as a dangerous threat to Jekyll. Well done if you got that right. Let's now go on to our second idea. Stevenson presents Hyde as a threat to civilization. Utterson's dream begins with a beautiful image of London. He sees the capital's streets as a great field of lamps. Now, this imagery is a reference to Victorian London street lighting. Why is Stevenson drawing attention to this? Well, the installation of electrical street lighting was one of the city's greatest technological achievements. Indeed, London was one of the first cities in the world to use such technology. Stevenson may be referencing a street lighting here to reflect London's status as a centre of civilization and progress. In similarity to his dream about Jekyll, Utterson's dream about London thus begins with a positive image. The description of a great field of lamps creates an impression of a respectable and civilized modern city. But this beautiful image of London's lamp-lit streets is then shattered by a horrific act of violence. Utterson witnesses Hyde barbarically trample the young girl from Enfield's story. What was an idyllic image of London's modern, respectable civilization is now ruined by this act of barbaric violence. Stevenson thus uses juxtaposition in these two descriptions. The first description is idyllic and peaceful, while the second is disturbing and violent. What is Stevenson suggesting here? Well, perhaps Stevenson is suggesting that Hyde represents a threat against progress and modernity. He represents a primitive violence that threatens the peace and civilization of Victorian London. But most disturbing of all is the fact that London seems like Hyde's natural environment. Even though Hyde is such a barbaric, violent creature, it seems that he very much belongs in civilization. In fact, we could say that London nearly seems to belong to Hyde. We can witness this in the descriptions of Hyde gliding stealthily through sleeping houses, and manically running through wider labyrinths of lamp-lighted city. This description creates an image of Hyde gliding, like a mist, through the city's passageways and houses. It seems that Hyde can effortlessly enter every street and every house of the city. Stevenson seems to be suggesting that there is no part of the capital that is safe from Hyde's corrupting influence. There are no areas that are protected from this villain. In fact, Hyde seems more like an all-pervasive presence in the city than a single person. Whenever Utterson tries to look at Hyde in this nightmare, this villain has no face, or one that melts before Utterson's eyes. This introduces a concerning idea. Hyde could be anyone. Perhaps Stevenson is suggesting here that Hyde should not simply be seen as an individual, but rather as a symbol. Perhaps he is a symbol of the evil aspects of human nature, the evil that is present in every one of us. It is for this reason that Utterson imagines Hyde as a faceless man. Hyde cannot be pinned down to a single identity, because he represents an evil that is present in everyone. So this extract isn't just about Mr. Hyde. It's about a deeper evil that is within this city. Let me explain. In this nightmare, Utterson is seeing a very different side of London than he sees by day. We must remember that Utterson is a lawyer who lives and works in the city. He is no doubt familiar with the city by day. But now Utterson sees a city that seems strange and obscure. He describes its streets as a strange, bewildering series of shadowy labyrinths. Now, a labyrinth is a maze. This metaphor very much captures the sense of disorientation that Utterson feels as he watches Hyde run through the narrow city streets. Utterson feels lost and confused, in a similar way that you might feel lost and confused in a maze. Even though Utterson is familiar with the city by day, this vision of London now seems completely alien to him. The city now seems like a confusing series of labyrinths. Yet, it's significant that this dream does arise from Utterson's imagination. This dream thus suggests that deep down, Utterson knows the truth about London. Beneath its respectable, civilized appearance lies a city of terrible moral decay, as represented by Hyde. This interpretation once again echoes Chapter 1. You may remember that Chapter 1 introduced the duality of London. On one hand, this chapter introduces the respectable aspects of the city as represented by the pleasant-looking street. On the other hand, you have the unsavory, corrupt aspects of a capital as represented by the sinister-looking building. Well, this extract from Chapter 2 further develops this theme about the dual nature of this city. Stevenson uses Utterson's nightmare to present Hyde as a symbol of the moral decay that threatens the peace and civilization of Victorian London. Great, we've now covered our second idea. Stevenson presents Hyde as a threat to civilization. Let's now read through both ideas one more time before we test you. Idea number 1, Stevenson presents Hyde as a dangerous threat to Jekyll, and idea number 2, Stevenson presents Hyde as a threat to civilization. Let's now test your memory. You have 20 seconds to fill in the key words. Off you go. Okay, let's see how well we have done. Idea number 1, Stevenson presents Hyde as a dangerous threat to Jekyll, and idea number 2, Stevenson presents Hyde as a threat to civilization. Well done if you got both of those right. Let's now go on to our lesson review. Utterson's nightmare clearly presents Hyde as a threatening character. Hyde firstly seems to threaten Dr. Jekyll's life. Hyde's violent entrance into Jekyll's room demonstrates that this villain represents a particularly sinister threat to all the peace and security that the scientist enjoys. Yet, we've also seen how Hyde represents a broader threat to civilization itself. Hyde symbolizes the forces of violence and evil that could destroy the progress of modern society. And that brings us to the end of this video. If you would like to watch more Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde videos, you can see the playlist above. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. I will be releasing more Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde videos across the coming weeks and months. But for now, all the best.